brothers and sisters, that our history is playing tricks on us. I'm fearful, brothers and sisters, that even though our history ought to provide us with places of strength, it also provides us with the moments that cause us the greatest difficulty. Here's what I am trying to say to you. I know that we have a rich and storied history, both as a community, both as the city of Joliet, and as individuals. I recognize that many of you have overcome great tragedy and great challenges in your life, both again as family members and as loved ones and as the different ethnicities that are represented here. I know that we can point back to our history and we can see the majestic success that we have encountered. But I'm also fearful that because of our vision of looking over our shoulder, it is causing us to misunderstand the circumstances that are in front of us. I've heard so often that the problems that we now confront are similar to the ones that we've had in the past. And I understand that there is a philosophical truth embedded in that statement. There is nothing new under the sun. And so for every problem that we face, you can believe that at some prior time, in some prior civilization, in some prior group of individuals, the same problem has been prevalent in that community as well. But I've got to also say, as I begin to look around the world that we're in, that there seems to be some uniqueness to this particular historical moment. Something strange is going on, and I'm fearful that in our romanticizing of our history, we are ignoring our present. Just this year, we have already experienced the senseless death of our youth on the streets of Joliet. And the only thing more saddening and tragic than this loss of life, in spite of its stunning atrocity, is the fact that many of us have become desensitized to the violence on our streets. Many of us have now gotten to the point where we're used to hearing about one of our young people, life needlessly ending on our streets, and nodding our heads in reverence to that moment and moving quietly on. I think there's something going on before us that we need to pay attention to. I'm amazed that each year there seems to be in our streets this growing heap of squandered potential of our children accumulating before us. Each year, more and more of our children become shackled in a system of indentured servitude by an economic system that holds them captive, not by force, but by precluding from them the instruments they're going to need to be able to compete. Let me say that simply. That we have a time in which we live where our children are falling further and further behind. And these metaphorical chains of education or the lack thereof are going to keep them out of a productive life and forever alter the journey that they're on. We send our children to a school system that seems, quite frankly, overwhelmed by the magnitude of our children's needs. And quite frankly, sometimes it simply seems underwhelming in its commitment to their well-being. Send our children to a school, and each year we see statistics of them failing out of the system, and yet there is no cry from the community that is sustained by all of us. No sense of indignation that we are raising a group of individuals who cannot even read their way to freedom. After having fought so vigorously for the right to vote, we now have children who could not read the ballot, and yet there is not an outrage rippling through our community. Now let me acknowledge, for we have administrators and teachers here. We have school systems that are filled with folks, from administration to the classroom to the lunch lady, who are performing heroic acts for our children every day. I don't want to paint all of the people in our school systems with one broad brush. However, it appears that the plethora of issues that our children present each day render even their efforts of less impact. Each year, the number of our children that drop out, fail to graduate, or simply leave the educational system without the adequate skills needed to compete in this technocentric society seems to only increase. Each year, our young men and women fall further and further behind while we watch more and more TV. And the question is, where are our leaders at? And where is the outrage? I talked about education in its provision of metaphorical change, but let me not ignore the fact that our education, or the lack thereof, for our children is also creating very real change for them. For each year, more and more of our young men and women find themselves citizens of the judicial system. A steady parade of young men and women go through the hollow halls of our justice system every day, and our system appears to be at its breaking point. Young men and women whose lives will be forever altered by this encounter that will rob them of the right to even participate in the future in the democratic institutions of our society, and will leave them handicapped in their effort to try to turn their lives around from the mistakes made in their past. There's no need for me to mention the devastating effect that their incarceration or encounter with the judicial system will have on their families, and even more tragically, the children that they often leave behind. How can we see this before us, and yet there be no sustaining cry from us? I'm fearful that we're watching over our shoulder and ignoring what's going on in front of us. Now, we're fortunate, my brothers and sisters, that the recent economic crisis that we've gone through seems to have awakened a few more of us. For those of us who thought that once we got out of the east side and made it to Shorewood, Plainfield, or the other places of affluence, that somehow we would be beyond the reaches of tragedy, the economic crisis has reminded us that our lives are deeply connected to those folks who have not escaped yet from the lower rungs of the socioeconomic ladder. The haves continue to gather, and the have-nots continue to lose. And while, my brothers and sisters, it seems like a well-worn adage, if they fail, we fail as well. Everywhere we look, there is evidence that the circumstances around us are changing. Even as we celebrate the historic first of our first African-American president, and even as we memorialize men like Benjamin Hook and all that he did as a part of our history, even as we look over our shoulder and celebrate the many milestones that we have, I wonder, have we gone asleep at the wheel?